I'd like to spend a couple minutes walking through what we do at our agency with our clients' forecasted plan and actuals documentation, outlining what their expectations are for mainly gross revenue month over month over month, though we do track a ton beyond just gross revenue. So to start, we as an agency for our partners, we're collecting a lot of monthly data for our clients to build this model. So here's some of the historic data we have on this example client that we've been tracking since December 2023. With this data, we're now able to start to project out the future. So we've got two different views for projecting. We've got the view of let's take the last rolling 4 months as our average and assume performance will stay close to that. We're planning out the month of November here, so that could be a bit of a risk. In that case, we might want to project out what's going to happen in November based more heavily on last November and less heavily on the rolling 4 months. This based more heavily on last November is still taking into account some of the performance expectations in real time. So the last rolling 4 months, but it's just a heavier weight towards last year, same month than just the last rolling 4 months. And that data becomes pretty clear here. So if our client came to us and they're like, hey, our goal is to exceed 1.2 million in gross revenue in November, we have two different models to work with, right? If we're looking at the last rolling 4 months, which might be a mistake since we are talking about the month of November, we could say, great client, it's looking like 75K is going to be the paid media spend recommendation to be able to achieve that 1.2 million. That's going to get us to 781K in paid revenue attributed from paid ads. We're going to look at the ROAS expectation and the MER expectation. Probably a little bit more accurately, we're going to look at last November more heavily, at which point we would be looking at this model, and we can see instead of needing to spend 75K, we might actually get away with just spending 60K, and that's going to get us again above that 1.2 million. And we're going to see a little bit lower of a need for sales to be attributed to paid revenue, coming in at almost $564,000. And the MER is going to be healthier. However, the ROAS is going to be lower, and that's because fewer of the sales and initiatives are going to be trackable back to paid media. So we land with a client on what level of spend they want. It's likely going to be somewhere between $60,000 and $75,000 to make this model work, given the two scenarios in front of us. Once we've gone ahead and planned that out, we can then start to look at how much spend of that, let's just call it, we landed on 60K for points of simplicity, and that we're planning to spend 60K across Google and Meta. So now that we've identified that, so we're kind of going off of this model here, we now can look at the ads plans that we can put together for Google and Meta. And we can see now with 60K, one could say, well, let's just spend evenly and split $30,000 to the one platform and $30,000 to another. And we can see in the Google world, again, looking at Google historical data, just as we were on the last tab to kind of put together this story, that 30K is actually the ideal amount of spend here. Why? Because we can see that that's where our contribution margin starts to break down. Everything, every spend level above $30,000 is going to give us a negative contribution margin. So that is precisely the level of spend we should expect to plan on Google. And we are expecting a acquisition MER or ROAS to come in at a 6.15. Why are we okay with that when we can have a much, much better ROAS up here? Well, because we're not going to drive as much of the business when we go against these lower spend levels. So that's why the recommendation here would be that 30K. We get the client's buy-in, at which point we build the media plan for Google that allows us to spend 30K and hit that 6.15x in acquisition MER. We'll go through and do the same exercise on Meta. And on Meta, we can see that the contribution margin starts to break down for us at $35,000. So there could be a world in which we say, let's spend $35,000 on Meta. We expect to have a really healthy acquisition MER. And therefore, because we're spending an additional 5K here, we'll spend 10K less on the other platform, Google. And in that world, we'll have an even more favorable acquisition MER, as well as contribution margin. So this is what we use as a tool to get our clients on the same page as us. Once we've aligned on total budget allocation per ad platform. In this case, we are only looking at Google and Meta, though we do the same exercise for TikTok, Pinterest, programmatic, and any other channel we're running with history on. Now it's our job as media buyers to go in and say, when we look at 25K for Google ads, how precisely, what campaigns and ads groups are we going to be running? And similar on Meta. Once we land on, we'll be spending 35K. Now it's our job to say what types of initiatives and campaigns will we be running to ensure that we hit this estimated return on ad spend, which is more heavily based again on last year than the rolling recent months. So that's really kind of pass one at getting into media planning and the steps we take behind the scenes to make sure our media plans are sound and they're steeped in data. Thank you.